Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe, and thank you to everyone who supports this podcast, especially the new patrons that we have this week. We have a massive thank you to our new patrons, Michelle and Jane Davis. Thank you so much. And if you would like to join Jane and Michelle, it's very, very simple. You just pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and you will get so many goodies. Just go and find out all the amazing things, that bonus material that you'll get to deep dive with Mark and I. Mr. Stay, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very good. I'm very good indeed. Hectic, traveling and finishing drafts and doing all sorts of stuff. Living the life that I want, frankly. So, it's going pretty well. Pretty good.
And you're off to give a presentation at universities now. You're getting in demand in universities across England. Isn't this brilliant?
They'll let anyone in. Yeah, I did one last week, which at Brighton, which was terrific. It was really, really good. Really just nice to meet young people who haven't been ground down by the world yet. It's terrific. They're full of energy and ideas, enthusiasm. And I'm in Manchester tomorrow, and I'm doing an event with Queeve at Blackwell's in Manchester. But if you're listening to this, it's already happened. So, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun day. Really looking forward to it.
That's exciting stuff. And we were kind of joking last week about an idea around doing some kind of spoiler special around Unwelcome. But these jokes, we run with them, don't we? And lo and behold.
Happening. Yeah, it's happening now. It's happening. Well, not now. We're going to have an Unwelcome spoiler special on the 27th of April, 2023, which is a Thursday. And it's going to be on YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check it out. It's going to be at 8 p.m. British Summer Time, which is 12 noon your time. On
PST.
And it's in New York. It'll be 4 p.m. I think.
No, 3 p.m.
3 p.m. 3 p.m.
EST,
rather. Yeah. And in Australia, it's 5 a.m. the next day, confusingly. I'll put all this in the links so you can find this stuff out. But yeah, it's come and join us. If you're an Academy member, if you're a patron, you're going to get the opportunity to ask questions up front. Particularly about that ending. Mr. D, I'm sure you've got all sorts of questions yourself as well.
I certainly do.
So, we're going to finally reveal all. So if you haven't seen Unwelcome yet, you should be able to rent it or buy it from your provider of digital movies. So that might be Apple, that might be Amazon, that might be Sky, depending where you are in the world. So it's available now. And it's going to be fun. Lots and lots of fun. A good hour of mayhem and red caps and goblins and stuff.
It's going to be brilliant. I mean, this is our very own spoiler special. Like, what podcast gets to do this of their own movie? So if you haven't seen it, like Mark said, do go and watch it. And you will have questions, absolutely guaranteed you will have questions. So write them down. And as we mentioned, if you're part of the Academy and the BXP team patrons, then you can submit in advance. If not, show up live, because this is a live event, folks. Me and Mark will be live on YouTube. It's going to be a ton of fun. If you've never been to a Bestseller Experiment live event before, they are absolutely hilarious and loads of fun. Anything can happen. That's the beauty of it. That is the beauty of it. I mean, pretty much anything happens when we're recording the podcast, really, Mark, doesn't it? But it's even more mayhem and lots of fun. And you also get to chat with other podcast fans. You get to meet people. We've had friendships. I'm sure there's been a marriage in there somewhere, Mark, at some point down
marriages, all
births,
sorts,
all kinds. So if you want to find your future mate, then come and join us on that day. You've got a few weeks to watch the movie. Brilliant stuff. Now, Mr. Stay, we've got a humdinger of an interview today, haven't we? I mean, it's not many podcasts can say that they get former CIA agents to interview, and not only that, but they reveal all the secrets of the CIA as well, don't they? I mean, it's a massive exclusive. We do pull them in. It's brilliant. But no, in jesting aside, do tell us about our amazing guest today, David McCloskey.
David McCloskey is a former CIA analyst and consultant at McKinsey & Company. And while he was at the CIA, he used to write for the president's daily briefing. This was when President Obama was around. He delivered classified documents. He was at oversight committees. He was up there. He also worked in CIA field stations across the Middle East, including Syria, which inspired his debut novel, and I got a copy here, Damascus Station. And the reviews for this are just phenomenal. Jack Carr, who's a best-selling author of a book called The Terminal List, and he's a former Navy SEAL sniper, he said he's shocked the CIA's publication review board allowed it. He said, read it now before it's banned. And there's a Hollywood adaptation under discussion as well. So this is a hot book at the moment. And it was such a delight to speak to David. So we discuss, among many other things, processing traumatic events through fiction, what spy fiction and movies get right and wrong, and why writing is a lonely team sport.
Brilliant. So if, like me, you're a fan of Homeland, then you'll want to hear this interview as well. We'll talk a bit about that after the interview. But let's dive in and have a chat with Mark being interrogated. Or is it the other way around? You're interrogating a CIA agent, Mark. Mark interrogating the wonderful David McCloskey.
David McCloskey, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Our absolute pleasure. Well, I'm very excited because I've got a copy of Damascus Station right here, which is I've seen not just from your wonderful publicist who sent me every quote under the sun, but I've been seeing this completely independently. People saying this is the best espionage spy intelligence novel they have read since Le Carre, which is really saying something. So tell us now. I've completely overhyped it. Tell us about Damascus Station.
Yeah, you bet. So Damascus Station is unsurprisingly a spy novel. It is set in the early years of the Syrian civil war, and I don't specify a date, but you could probably think of this as 2011, 2013, something like that. And it's a story about a CIA case officer named Sam and his Syrian recruit Miriam, who break one of the cardinal rules of espionage and fall into this forbidden relationship. They travel to Damascus to hunt down the killer of another CIA officer. And in the process of that, really come face to face, I think, with the tension and the conflict and the passion in their own relationship, as well as into conflict with a fairly brutal pair of Syrian brothers, one of whom is a bit more than he seems on the face of it, and really uncover a very dark secret at the heart of the Syrian regime. And so this is a book, obviously, about espionage and spycraft and all that fun stuff. But I'm also hopeful that it's a book about love, about loyalty, about betrayal, and also, I think, what it means to be human in the middle of a very inhuman conflict.
Excellent stuff. And let's make it clear, listeners, David, when he's writing about espionage and intelligence, the intelligence community, he does know what he's talking about. Long form fiction, unlike the sort of daily barrage of news that we get, it can give us a perspective on a situation like Syria, which, I remember when all this kicked off, it's completely overwhelming. You're getting all kinds of news and information. This began, I believe, not as a novel, but more as a kind of an exercise that you were undertaking in order to make sense of your time in the intelligence services and what happened in Syria. Can you sort of fill us in on that?
Yeah, that's right. So, I worked pretty much exclusively on Syria when I was at the CIA, and I lived there for a time before the war started. And as a result of that, I feel and felt a very deep connection to that place and to its people. And, the war was really just kind of it was heartbreaking. It's a tragedy on so many levels, but most of all, on the human level, right? And so when I left the agency, I was really deeply affected by that. And I left in 2014. And this was a time when the country was sort of starting this process of breaking apart. It was in a civil war. And, we have now seen that the country, let's even just put the earthquake aside, right? Yeah. Before that, we're talking about a country that has had half of its population displaced, hundreds of thousands killed. It's broken apart into probably 4 political pieces right now. So, the amount of human suffering that has been part of this process is just truly staggering. And so when I sat down to write, it was much less about crafting a spy novel, to be quite candid with you, and much more about me working through all of that And so Damascus Station really began its life almost as a series of just, I guess you could call them reflections or short stories, some of which were true, some of which weren't, to help me kind of process what I had seen and what Syria was going through. And I found through that process that I really, really enjoyed writing itself, that I'd never done it before. I had never taken a creative writing class. I had, I think the last time I'd really done anything similar to this would have been in, a literature class in high school. I don't even think I took anything like that in college. And so I found that I was able to connect with the world and with my emotions through writing. But the product of that time, I would never show to a single human alive today because it's terrible, from a standpoint of a piece of fiction that's a story that someone would want to read. It was not written with that in mind, but I put it all aside for a few years and then was able to come back to it. And I think having that distance was helpful for me in thinking about, how would I actually produce a story that not only I wanted to read, but that someone else wanted to read. And those two things aren't always the same.
Yeah, let's get the timeline correct. As I understand it, that those first sort of, as you say, little vignettes and reflections, that was written in a 3-month gap between you leaving the CIA and starting another job.
That's
and
right.
Then I believe it sort of sat on your laptop for 4 years. Is that correct?
5 years. Sat for 5 years. Yep.
Okay, and then you came back to it. What was it was it sort of calling to you all that time, or did you kind of wake up one day and think, now I'm ready? What was it that brought you back to the keyboard?
Yeah, I think it was a couple things. I think through that 5-year period, there would have been occasional, evenings where I might have had a whiskey or two and sat down and looked at it and thought, I wish I had time to go back to this. But I was doing a consulting job in that span that was very demanding and that made this kind of creative exercise pretty much impossible. I also had we started our family in that period. There are little kids running around. It's just, not a great environment for getting the creative juices flowing or focusing on anything. And what ended up happening was in 2019, I actually, for a number of different reasons, was able to take a leave of absence for 6 months from my consulting job. And because I had remembered the way it felt to write and how much I had enjoyed it, I told myself and forced myself that I'm going to at least try in this period to write the book. And I thought when I started that process that I would be kind of polishing what I had worked on. And what I quickly discovered was I just had to write something entirely new, but drawing on some of the inspiration from what I had worked on 5 years earlier.
And when I love that idea that you sort of had a sense memory of what it felt like to write. And what does it feel like to you now, sort of sitting down at the desk? Because you have written before in terms of you've written intelligence reports for the Obama presidency, I believe. Is that correct?
I wrote most of my writing would have been occurring during the Obama presidency. There was a little bit for Bush, but most of it was under Obama. Yeah.
Okay. Whereas what's fascinating is weirdly, you're not the first author we've had on the podcast this year who's written for a president. We had an author called Christian Cameron who used to write intelligence reports way back in the day.
Interesting. Okay.
What he told us, he said he found that it was a great way to learn to write fast because he was writing sometimes 10,000 words a day. And he said he wrote without doubting himself, and he found that helped him become a novelist.
Yeah.
What was it that you took from that experience that informed your novel writing, if anything?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because there are definitely things that are similar and that were helpful, and transferred over to the writing of fiction. And then there are other things that if I had tried to imprint the way I wrote at the CIA to fiction, I think the book would have been much duller for it, right?
Yeah.
And wouldn't have worked. I think practically the thing that's helpful about that kind of writing, which, by the way, is very dry, analytical writing, but it's also precise. It forces a level of precision into the language and forces a mentality around the importance of every word that I think is very useful in fiction, to have that obsession, right? You're looking at it with a different lens, but it's still this craftsman-like approach to, really an obsessive approach with making sure that you are, you're not being wasteful with words, you're being economical, but you're also using the right ones at the right time. And it also, I think, gave me an appreciation for the connection between the individual words up to the sentences, up to the paragraphs, up to the structure, and how it all has to hang together. So that would be how I think that writing, because I was doing that writing every day, all day for 8 years, right? And so that builds some habits in you. Now, I will say, though, that when I write fiction, so all that stuff's helpful, but when I write fiction, the thing that I found to be really almost mystical about it is that I have the feeling, and it might just be a good story, I'm not sure how real this is, right? That when I'm in the flow and I'm writing, I am accessing something that the universe wants me to access.
Right.
And it's a different world maybe, but it's a way of better understanding our own. And so when I'm doing that, it's like I'm letting go of some kind of like conscious, almost like ego. And I'm open to letting this stuff in that is pure creation. And my role in it's sort of mysterious, like how much of it is me doing it, how much of it is something else. But I have like a weirdly, which is maybe strange for a write-up commercial fiction, I don't know. But I have a very kind of mystical view of what happens. And I find that to be really enchanting when it's moving. Now, it sucks when it's not, because you're kind of sitting there just staring at a keyboard trying to bang away, like, or you spend a whole morning and you'll have 2 sentences that are terrible. But when you get to that point, it's really magical. And it's where all the best stuff comes from. The best plot ideas, the best character, like it's where it's the swamp that everything kind of emerges from. And that's what I'm pretty addicted to.
That is brilliant. That's the sort of thing I'd expect from a fantasy or science fiction author, but not from someone who's you're dealing with very real events here. And I saw in the acknowledgements in the back as well, you fictionalize reality. You refer to your version of the CIA as a fictionalized version of the CIA. So you are in some way, I guess, creating a kind of a parallel reality to what's going on. What I'm delighted to learn is the CIA has a publication review board.
They do. Yes.
So tell us about that, how that came about.
Yeah. Well, unsurprisingly, given the information that I had access to during my time inside, they care about what I say and what I write going forward. And on my last day at the agency, I was trotted into a room that would sort of recollect the vibes of a broom closet. And there was a, woman at a desk in there with a stack of papers, and she had me sign all of them. And I stupidly asked, can I have copies of these? And she, of course, laughed and said, you absolutely cannot. There will be no copies of anything. But what I found out in that debriefing was, essentially that I'm required to submit anything that's really related to my prior work, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to the agency for review. So if I were writing a sci-fi novel, that didn't involve any of this stuff, probably wouldn't have to submit it. But I worked on Syria. I lived there. I'm writing a spy novel that features the CIA in Syria. And, I want to more or less play by the rules, if I can. So I sent them the manuscript, and it's really wonderful. It's actually, I will say, it's a very good organization to deal with. They're fast. They review things quickly. I have colleagues who have to submit their manuscripts to like DOD, the Department of Defense, for review. That's from my understanding, a very slow, drawn out process that can take the better part of a year. I believe that the person who reviewed Damascus Station finished it in about a week and got their edits back to me. I like to think that's because they loved it so much. That's a good sign,
yeah.
Might have just been trying to get stuff off of their desk before vacation. And the best part of interactive, so they're great. And I will say that I had done my homework for this, and I had a document that I sent them that had about 300 sources in it that showed how I had gotten the information from publicly available stuff, right? So it wasn't coming out of the classified regions of my brain. So I had done my homework, but they still got it back to me quickly. The edits they made were efficient and I think easy, reasonable. But I have to say the best part of the process is that I sent them a document that looked, it was a Word document, right? That has the book in it. And what I got back was a PDF that was in all caps. Everything had been turned to caps. And someone literally takes a black highlighter and blacks out the stuff you can't use.
Redacted.
And they send it back, So it kind of has this wonderful feeling of coming out of a time machine from the 1960s or something like that when you get it back. But it was, it's kind of a funny bureaucratic quirk, I guess, of being a former agency officer, but it's not typically a hassle, and they're reasonable.
I'm still reeling from the fact that they got back to you in a way. I know every published author is listening to this is going, well, that's faster than my agent, my editor, So,
that's right. I do wonder if I might have submitted it before a holiday or something, and they were trying to like clear the queue out. They were fast with the second one too. So they're pretty good.
Good stuff. And you talk about, one of the reasons people love this book are the little details that make all the difference about, modern intelligence. The thing that keeps coming up in almost every review and interview I see is the hot dog machine. Can you tell us about the hot dog machine?
Yes. Well, so there actually is a hot dog machine at Langley. It's in the basement, or as people who work in the Langley basement call it, the ground floor. And I have never seen a hot dog vending machine anywhere else in the world. I'm sure it exists, but I have yet to see it. And it's down there. It's got Hormel hot dogs in it. It's loaded in kind of the manner of a belt-fed, machine gun and with hot dogs. And I will say that, the Langley cafeteria closes, at least when I was there, I think it closed at like 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon. So if you have to stay late and you haven't planned to stay late, your options are somewhat limited as it gets to be 1 or 2 in the morning. And by that point in time, I don't care to admit this, the hot dog starts to look pretty good, but the actual number of those that I've consumed, I think, will remain a highly classified fact that I will certainly not admit to.
Fair enough. I won't press you on that. What's now, you've been rightly praised for the details. Jack Carr, the author Jack Carr, was amazed that the CIA review board let it pass. And he says, read it now before it's banned. People love this for getting things right. When we get experts in the field on the podcast, we'd love to ask them what writers get wrong in fiction. So what is it writers regularly get wrong in espionage fiction? And appreciating that James Bond is a fantasy, we know that's so far removed from any kind of reality. But what is the kind of stuff that people get right? And then what do people get right as well?
Well, yeah. So I think your caveat's an important one, because I am a huge fan of all kinds of spy fiction, including the stuff that's much more, action-packed, shoot 'em up kind of stuff. Like I really enjoy that piece of the genre, and I read it all the time. I think it's great. It's great fun. So none of what I'll say is intended as some kind of slight at those authors. It's merely to say that, I'm sort of, trucking in a version of the genre that's attempting to layer on a bit more authenticity to the real work of the CIA, and in particular its operations officers. So, I think in general, the kind of Hollywood version of spy fiction tends to feature a lot more weapons and explosions than is typical. You see in series like Homeland, for example, that CIA officers are operating, and conducting operations on U.S. soil, which, isn't really what happens. You see, well, I mean, heck, I even, have this relationship between Sam and Miriam in the book that is, I really think it's wonderful in the novel, but in real life, that rarely if ever happens. And if it does, you're toast. Your whole career is over. This isn't like sort of a aw shucks, brush it off kind of a thing. I do think that the kind of hard, slow work of recruitment, recruiting human assets is not frequently dealt with in spy fiction. A book that I love, and it's probably my favorite of the Le Carré canon, is Little Drummer Girl, because it does, I think, an excellent job of dealing with the psychology, the manipulation, intimacy of that type of relationship, between Charlie and Gadi Becker. And so I love that book because of that, that authentic treatment. The other thing that it's sort of tough to figure out how to do in fiction is, because you're not trying to clutter up your book with too many characters, is, the actual CIA is a large bureaucracy that, there are more than like 3 people in the station in Damascus, for example. And, you have to whittle these kind of, you have to whittle your portrait of the organization down to a manageable number of characters so you can really keep the tension high and not, frankly, get the reader confused. And so you end up with, operations that get approved by a single person, or that there's 2 or 3 people in the discussion, when in real life, there's like going to be doing any of this stuff. I mean, there would just be armies of people involved and tons of lawyers, and, it would quickly kind of turn into a not interesting bit of fiction. But in reality, that bureaucracy is very much present. And that's not usually dealt with in spy fiction. So, I think what I enjoyed doing with this book was taking pieces of the bureaucracy and whatnot to create something that maybe was approaching a bit of an intelligence procedural in some ways, without hopefully, so you have that authenticity that comes into it, which was important to me. But, I still made stuff up, and I had to sacrifice reality at parts on the altar of character and story. And I will say that one of my favorite reviews of this novel is that the CIA's Center for the Study of Intelligence, they do like a quarterly, I'm not sure how often, maybe it's quarterly, comes out. They do a book review. They do book reviews in there. And so the CIA reviewed my book, and there's a wonderful review that points out a whole bunch of the things that I sort of sacrificed on the altar of fiction. It's mostly a positive review, but the things they call out, I think, are quite humorous. I would definitely recommend that to your listeners to go take a look at that.
Oh, we will. If you could send us a link, that would be great. What I've been seeing as well is, there are things like conversations about photocopier paper and staples and all these tiny little things that can, people in the field, it can drive them nuts. You think you can, you've got spy satellites and what have you, you've got this great technological advances, but the tiny things can drive you nuts. And there's a lot of that in there as well, adding to that reality.
Yes, 100%. And I, honestly, the way that my characters see the CIA is probably the way that I see it, which is, and I've described it this way before, is kind of a uniquely bipolar organization. So you have, on the one hand, the very interesting and extreme things done to achieve the mission. And then on the other hand, you have all the mundane bureaucratic stuff that goes along with being a large organization. And one of those things is, oftentimes your procurement arm isn't matching supply and demand. And so you don't have, some of the basic things that you need just from an office supply or office furniture standpoint. And yet the organization is also doing these amazing things over here. And that tension, that duality, I always found it to be, humorous and also hopefully insightful. And I wanted my characters to experience that as well. And honestly, the reason why I ended up putting so much of this stuff, like, there's mentions of agency regulations and things like that in the book, was I wanted, it was driven by character. It wasn't some desire to kind of just randomly sprinkle stuff through. It was, I'm dealing with, in particular in the case of Sam, who's probably the protagonist of at least the first part of the novel, and his chief of station in Damascus, Artemis Proctor. They're CIA operations officers. That's their world. This is how they think. And so the character, trying to dial those characters in was what led to, I think, becoming a little bit more of a procedural in some respects.
Yeah. And you mentioned making stuff up there. And I think you're in good company, because I don't, listeners might not know this, but for example, John le Carré, he would invent phrases which have now become part of the terminology that the intelligence community uses. So, like the word mole for a deep cover agent, which he used in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, he kind of made that up, and it's now common parlance. And other phrases like fieldcraft and scalp hunters, and so. Have you any ambitions? Are there any words in Damascus Station, any phrases that you hope make it in, because they put that review where they kind of pointed out all the things that you sacrificed, but who knows? They might be using those terms in a few years.
So I have to admit that I have not been as ambitious. I don't even know if he was intending to create a new vocabulary, no. But he did. And I think Mick Herron has kind of done the same thing with some of his, he refers to the investigators, I think, in the, Slow House novels as, the dogs and things like that.
Dogs, yeah.
And you think about it and it's like, well, yeah, if you were inside right now, you'd want to adopt some of that terminology. And 20 years from now, everyone would just think that it came from inside. The one other interesting anecdote on the adoption of Le Carré's terminology is that the CIA's old Soviet, Central Europe and Soviet division used to be called, I believe it was called CE division and then SE division and then CE division, I believe. And some old timer's going to yell at me after they hear this podcast because I messed up the names. But after the Russia House came out, the CIA started to call the entity inside Langley that works on Russia House. It wasn't called Russia House before, and now it is called Russia House informally. And that doesn't show up on any org chart anywhere, but everyone refers to it as Russia House because of John le Carré. So I have not been as ambitious in creating my own vernacular. I think perhaps as the books go on, I might throw some things in that that do that, or that maybe attempt to do that, or that frankly, even without me attempting, might just hopefully catch on. But so far, I think in particular in Damascus Station, I was really trying to hew to reality more so than making that kind of thing up.
Very good. It's kind of out of your hands, isn't it? But if you start seeing hot dog machines turning up in remote parts of the intelligence community, you've done something. I'd love to talk about, because we know that writing is very solitary occupation, but I saw in the acknowledgements you make reference to your father, who's a writer, and you mentioned your wife Abby as well. Yeah, you mentioned that they gave you feedback, and how has that worked with them as a kind of a family affair?
Yeah, well, I talked with a lot of different writers about their process, and I'll say that there are pretty wide kind of range of approaches to this, and none of them are right or wrong. But what works for me has been writing the first draft. And I'll talk to in particular, my wife about the plot and the story, but she won't typically read anything until I'm done with that first draft. I really try to get that down on paper before anyone's really engaging with the written word. And through that process, if I have questions about a particular, aspect of the, of agency operations, or a bit on, some cultural piece about, someone who did this kind of work at the agency, or any other kind of technical question, I'll be asking those in kind of, phone calls or emails throughout the process, but I don't really show anything to anyone until that first draft is done. But once that draft is done, I typically try to get a reaction from different types of readers. So I have people who read particular parts for technical stuff. I have, like my wife and some family members who will read it because, they have, an interest in helping me and an eye for, helping me avoid horrible pitfalls, and then I'll have people read it who are spy fiction aficionados and who read all this stuff. And then I frankly go out every book and I try to find a small group of people who don't really read spy fiction at all, but who read a lot, and read outside the genre, because I just want a kind of completely unvarnished assessment of the story and whether or not it's too wonky at parts and does it get bogged down and all that. So I like the process to eventually become much more outward facing and to bring a lot of perspectives into it, because I find that, frankly, it helps me to think through the story more effectively and to really put the writing, the story, the characters, the plot, all of it under a very grueling examination to, then go back into a whole kind of, once I have all that feedback, and I've got, like, for example, I've got my third novel written, I've got, or close to written, I guess, and I'm starting to get feedback on it. And, it's a very helpful process for understanding where you've screwed stuff up and how it can be better. So I think I said in the acknowledgements, like it's a lonely team sport, the creation of a novel, because there are these periods where you're just alone doing it, plunking away. And then there's other periods where, at least for me, I've found, you want all that opinion to help shape it into the best possible story it could be.
Very good. Very good stuff indeed. You mentioned book 2, book 3. So are these continuing the same kind of characters, the same series, or are they standalones? What's in the future, David?
So I would think of it as the same universe, but not necessarily a kind of contiguous series. So in the second book, which will be out later this year, it's Russia focused. It has some overlap in characters. Artemis Proctor comes back in a larger role in the second book. And a few minor characters are back, but she's kind of the principal connection point. And then the third book, which again, I'm in the process of writing, is very Proctor focused. She is the protagonist of that book. And it's really her story. It's also, at least in its current form, although this could change, a bit of an homage to Tinker Tailor. So it centers on a mole hunt at Langley, and Proctor is in more or less the George Smiley role in that novel. So that one is, and the books all relate to one another, but you could do them all as a standalone. You could read them all as a standalone too, at least in their current form.
Fantastic. Can't wait. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. Folks, Damascus Station is out there now. Grab a copy before it gets banned. Enjoy. David, thanks so much. Hope to speak to you again soon. Take care.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. I mentioned before the interview that Homeland was one of my favorite. Actually, I've got to admit, it's my second favorite show ever. After, of course, fill in the gaps. Everyone knows 1, 2, 3. Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad.
But Homeland actually was a close second, and I was so excited when I heard that David was coming on the show, because so much of what he's writing about is capturing a lot of the magic and essence of what made Homeland such a great series. But to be able to kind of pick up the book with an actual CIA agent who's an analyst who's been on the front line is absolutely brilliant. But what I found fascinating about what David was saying is this book took a long time to come to fruition. It's a sense of like, it needed time to marinate. And I wonder how often that happens when people have been in, say, a career for most of their life, and they have these ideas, but there's this idea of this marinating process which he went through.
I think it's very common. I think it's happened with me. I mean, weirdly, you know, Robot Overlords is coming up for its 10th anniversary this year. And I've been looking at my diaries from 10 years ago. And there's one from Tuesday, 26th of March, so almost exactly 10 years ago when we recorded this. And I've got a note that my agent enjoyed Winter's, the original version of Woodville was called Winter's Books of Myths and Magic. She enjoyed Winter. She gave me a few pointers over the phone for improving the pitch doc, blah, 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 blah. So 10 years ago, I was working on a version of what became The Witches of Woodville. So, you know, these things, you think, great, I'll knock this out in 6 months, another bestseller kind of thing. But sometimes they take a long, long time to discover their shape, to discover their form, you know, to become what they truly are. And this is because I think we will have an idea of something that is half formed in our heads, much like this sentence, that we slowly piece to. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Podcast is just one big metaphor. You know, that we slowly glom these things together and go, oh, that's what it's about. And there comes a moment, and it can sometimes take years. There was something I was working on at the beginning of the year that I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I know exactly what this is. I put it together. And I did a first draft and I thought, well, that's not what I wanted. I wasn't expecting that at all. So I've put it away. I put it away, and it is going to marinate, and it's there ticking away at the back of my head. And at some point, I've moved on to something else. And when I finish that, I'll come back and have a look at it and think, and it's like looking at a diamond. You look at it, all the different facets from different angles, and, you know, and eventually you find what you're looking for. You find the shape in all the refraction and what have you.
Yeah, I think it's really, really fascinating but the danger of that, of course, and I'm sure there's people who recognize this as well, is there is a danger that the idea of allowing something to sit for too long can either make it stagnant. I always think about running water, or, you know, the still pond, or it can become an excuse for procrastination. Oh, I'll just let it marinate a bit more. And so it's a really difficult balance, isn't it? Because I totally understand the need to sometimes let things sit, and I think that's a very good. And what does it do? I mean, if you think about the literal metaphor of marinating, it tenderizes it, makes it easier to digest and swallow. In many ways, it's more flavorful because you've let it sit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You've got the perspective, right? But if it becomes about procrastination, I'll just let it sit for another month, another year. I know that can be, and I think there can be a tendency for people to use it as an excuse not to just get on with it and get going with it.
Yeah, but what you do while that's marinating, you get on with something else.
Work with something else, yeah, exactly. As long as you're doing something, that's the most important thing, isn't it? So if that's your story that you're just waiting to be ready for you, that's never going to really happen, is it?
No, I had a one-to-one with someone the other day, and they were kind of stuck on this one project. And one of the reasons they were stuck in it was because they were writing it at a very difficult time in their life. And they had every time they sat down to write the story, they had associations with that period in their life. And they're close to finishing, but they just can't get it over the line. So I've said, put it away, work on a short story, work on something new, completely fresh, completely different, something that and it just so happened they had something actually on the back burner, to extend this cooking metaphor, that I said, well, you know, work on that instead. You've already got something with it, have some fun with it, write a short story based on that. Well, just do something else, just so you can rediscover the joy of writing, because every time they were sitting down, they were thinking, oh, this is painful. And that's not a good place to be in. So I've said to them, put that to one side. It's not going anywhere. It will always be there. Do something that's fun and joyous, and where you're not carrying the burden of all these associations, and discover how you love writing again. Then maybe you can come back to that.
Brilliant. Now, who'd have thought we've got a CIA analyst being interviewed, and he's talking my language, accessing something the universe wants us to access. It's magical and mystical. He said about this idea of getting
when I sent this to you, did you expect to be discussing mystical, creative, universal energies?
I love it.
You know,
I think it's absolutely brilliant.
I mean, call it what you want, but that for me, when I'm in the zone, writing, that's kind of what it feels like,
It is. And I think he just, David described it so well, this idea of, he used this word mystical, which is, it's a great word because it's often used when we can't quite explain it. It's something out there which just, we feel it, but we can't really put it into words. And I think every single writer who's ever got into something in any shape or form have experienced that, either a flash moment of it where it's like 10 seconds of moment of inspiration where you just think, whoa, where did that idea come from? Or I'm sure, I don't know how many times you've experienced, Mark, but I experienced it once where I started writing an idea at about 6 o'clock in the evening, and I literally kind of almost came out of a trance at about 5 a.m. in the morning because the birds were singing. Right. And I couldn't believe that I had written for like 9 hours without even, it felt like I wasn't even breathing. I was just so into this idea, and and I was trying to write it down quick, it's coming quicker than I could write it down. When you get these moments of being in the zone or being in the flow, are they flashes, or are they kind of moments where you sit down for 2 hours and the whole time just vanishes?
It's usually 2 hours, and it's usually in the morning, and it's part of my. And you have mornings where it doesn't come or it's not quite working. But when it's like it's like I've been hypnotized or had a deep bath or had a nap or whatever. Yeah, I come out like slightly giddy. I come out slightly giddy, but very, very happy and satisfied. And it's not every time, doesn't happen every time. I tell you what, I had it this afternoon.
Really?
Because I've been, because I'm away for the next 3 days. I've got a deadline for a script rewrite. And what I wanted to do was finish it today so I can give it to my writing partner. So while I'm away, she can look at it and dig into it. And I managed to get to the end of the script. But that was because all notifications were off, head was down, and it just, I had lots of good notes. And I was just in the zone, and it felt so good. Now, I know that writing isn't perfect. I'm going to come back to it and edit it and blah, 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 blah. But I basically did about 25 pages of script, which is normally I'm happy. If I get 3 to 5 pages a day done, I am over the moon.
So that's going to some. So not only do you get, you're more productive, but would you also say that you do your best work when you get in that zone?
Yeah,
it's almost like you're not questioning yourself. You just
exactly the key thing there.
Flow. It's like there's no stops, right?
The key thing that David said is letting go of the ego and letting creation in. That self-doubt thing, we've talked about this a lot. That thing of looking over your shoulder, doubting yourself. Let go of that. I sound like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Let go. Use the Force. You just got to trust the process. Just trust the process. And yeah, some of what you'll write is imperfect and will need editing, but getting out on the page is so important.
Interestingly, the more you self-doubt, if you think about this over the lifetime of your writing, the more you self-doubt, the more of your time is spent being blocked or self-blocked, you could almost call it, because you're questioning. Every time you question, you're taking up precious writing time. And if you were extrapolating that over the lifetime, imagine someone started writing in their, say, 20s, and they lived to the ripe old age of, 90. That's 70 years of, when you add that up, it would be literally probably years spent doubting yourself instead of just writing it. Because, and so there's a continuum, isn't there? There's people that are, everyone has a degree of self-doubt, or they question things too much, they overanalyze things too much, and we're all on this continuum of like 1 to 100, somewhere along that scale. And so if you're listening to this and you self-doubt a lot, this is the motivational minute jumping out. But if you listen to this and you self-doubt a lot, why don't you work out what that actually will mean to you over your lifetime in terms of how much time you're going to lose to writing just because you're doubting something? It's kind of bonkers. I mean, it can literally take years off your writing life, I think, for some people. And it's a practice, I believe. It's a practice to when you hear that voice in your head saying, oh, this is rubbish, or this won't work, or this is, I'm not feeling this, rather than engaging with that voice, just tell it to shut up and move on, right? And just keep writing and trust, like you said, Mark, trust the process, because by the end of the process, you might discover that you have to go through that questioning, Because that's what a lot of novel writing is. It's about questioning things all the way through. It's question, and eventually get to the end, which is maybe the big answer of how it all fits together. But allow the questions and embrace them, but don't let them stop you in your tracks.
Trust the process, you must. Yes. Let go.
I love
it's my third impression.
It's third impression today. It's amazing. I love what David said about writing being a lonely team sport. I've never heard it kind
great,
of
isn't it?
shaped like that before. And I think that it acknowledges these two facets that we have as a writer. The first facet is that we are drawn to liking time on our own, because you can't not enjoy that if you're a writer. It's part of the therapy of, I think, having that time to just go away and hide and sometimes get away from the chaos of your life or the noise of the kids, or shut yourself off from the thoughts of work or all the other things and dramas happening in your life, and just kind of escape to write. And so there's this idea that it is very isolating, and we sometimes say, that's a major problem, it's too isolating in some cases. But it is this balance, isn't it, Mark? It's a balance between that isolation and that time to yourself, and then interacting with other people in your writing team, as I like to think of it, beta readers, editors, publishers.
This is the yin and yang, isn't it? See, totally I can do woo-woo too. It's that thing, you have that moment of isolation. You have that where you don't doubt yourself, where you get everything on the page. And then you have to emerge from that and say to people, what do you think of this? Does this make any sense? And that's where the teamwork comes on. So, call them what you want, beta readers, sensitivity readers, whatever, technical checks, whatever you want to call it. It's all part of your due diligence as an author. I don't think there are many authors who will just, put something down as a first draft and then put it out without showing it to anyone else.
There are people though that do that though, Mark, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure there are. I
think there's more than we probably think, because I think a lot of
braver people than me.
Well, they are, but I think a lot of people, when they start writing, it's a bit like, I don't know, it's a bit like in a lot of things where we take on, if we've got a bit of knowledge about it and we've got a confident personality, when we start that process, we think, this is great, this is awesome, put it out there without that knowing that it could be that much better, or being so close to it that we can't see our own mistakes, for example.
The key word you said there was a little knowledge, and a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
It is a dangerous thing, yeah. If you have a little bit of knowledge about coding, won't probably go too well for you if you try and but I think
it's like, I know a little bit about spies. I'll write about spies, and of course all your knowledge of spies has come from watching Bond and Jason Bourne and this and that and the other, and then you end up just recycling a bunch of cliches. Whereas if you want to write about spies, you don't have to have worked for the CIA, but I would suggest talking to someone who has, just this week we've got a deep dive with Stuart Gibbon, who used to be in the police force in the UK. He's done a deep dive for us, answering our listener questions on all the processes of the UK police force. Now, we all think, because we've seen some documentaries on TV or seen episodes of The Bill, or we think, we know what the police do. We don't. We've got to keep up to date with these things. So it's all part of your due diligence as an author, and some of that is about writing about outside your own experience. So as I mentioned in the next Woodville book, I've got characters suffering from PTSD. Now, I know very little about that, so I went to two people who live with PTSD, and they read what I'd done some research beforehand. I did as much as I could in isolation. Then I gave it to them and said, right, what have I got wrong? And they gave me really, really useful notes. So this is all part of what we do as authors now. I don't think you could ever have the hubris to not make this part of your process now. It can only make it a better book.
But it can also be a challenge for people to find sometimes highly specialized. I could say hand on heart, well, we know David now, but I wouldn't know anyone that I could reach out to in the CIA to ask for feedback. But that's where someone like David's book could be useful. If you're thinking about writing a book about or elements of the CIA, read books by people that have been in the CIA, even if they're non-fiction or fiction. I think non-fiction comes into play here as well, where you want to get really specialized knowledge about something. Reading a book around that area can be a really useful thing to do as well.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Now, if you would like to join Mark and I in the extended edition of this podcast, this week we're going to be talking about the need to process things in your life by writing and the importance of doing that. We're also going to talk about taking time off, the idea of a sabbatical, but also discussing, is it essential to have a deadline with a sabbatical? Is that the thing that makes all the difference? We're going to talk about the practice of making every word count on the page and quirky details which capture reviewers' imaginations, such as the hot dog machine. We're also going to look at the making of sacrifices, the things we have to let go of on the altar, as David talked about it. And finally, we're going to give you a little preview into who's coming on the show next week. So for that and more, join us in the extended. Pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. So, folks, if you missed the extended version, we actually have a humdinger. We talked all kinds of things, least of all, a 5-minute discussion about the importance of hot dog machines, which doesn't sound very important, but we actually linked it, didn't we, Mark? We should just say, if anyone's read Back to Reality, our hot dog machine was the cow. So if you haven't read Back to Reality, go read the book, and then it'll all make sense. It'll all make sense. So, Mark, tell us what's happening on socials this week.
All sorts of good news this week. So on the Academy, Karen's story, she says, another win. I'm actually now a paid author. Karen says this is totally unexpected, and it may be my favourite win to date because I belong to the Society of Authors. I have free membership to the ALCS, which is the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society in the UK. She said they sent me a statement via email last week, which I didn't bother to open because I thought it would just be zero. Karen doesn't have a book out there, but she wrote some magazine articles a few years ago that she'd never even listed with them because she was sure there was like a 3-year limit for magazines. But anyway, she did the list and she did list 2 short stories that appeared in anthologies. And anyway, she got 92 quid out of it. So
that's not bad.
Yeah,
cool.
It's just fantastic. So it's her first payment as an author, which is always a joy.
Big milestone.
Everyone, if you've written an article, if you've had a script made, if you've got a book made, sign up with ALCS, the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society. It's a one-off payment. It's like 36 quid or something like that. Or if you're a member of Society of Authors, it's free. I think they pay out twice a year. I got quite a chunky bit of change from this one. I think it's the most I've ever had because Robot Overlords was shown in Spain and Japan and Germany, so I get money for that. But also in the UK, we have PLR, which is the public lending rights. So every time someone takes a book out the library, I get about 30p. But ALCS does the international version of that as well. So if your book is being taken out of libraries across the world, you get money for that too. So sign up. I'll put a link in the show notes for both of those so you can check those out.
Wow, that's amazing. That got me thinking about how people could completely take advantage of that at your local libraries by taking books out and returning them and taking them. Just hire a kid during the summer.
I'm all for it.
That's like people on Spotify, like they finish, so friends of mine who are artists, they'll finish their day in the studio and they'll just put Spotify on and play their album on repeat all night, come back in.
I mean, the weird thing is,
pence.
Yeah, well, the weird thing is, it's about 31p for each time a book is taken out.
Wow.
That's more than most authors will earn from like a Kindle promotion.
Well, that's the crazy thing, yeah, because you often think, I mean, the stereotype is, you don't want your book to be taken out of the library loads because then people aren't buying it. But the irony is, you earn more money by the sounds of it than versus say Kindle release.
Great.
That's amazing.
Now you remember we've had Susie Edge on the podcast. We had a fantastic deep dive with Susie talking about her TikTok account and history and her amazing book. She's got a new book coming and she's got a pre-order campaign that's kicking off. And she mentioned this in that deep dive episode. So you heard it here first, folks. Her new book is called Vital Organs, A History of the World's Most Famous Body Parts. I mean, who doesn't want to read that? That just sounds amazing. And it's coming up September 2023. You can pre-order special signed editions from Goldsboro and all sorts of great stuff. This is Susie. She's in our BXP group. She's one of our family. It's amazing to see such a terrific pre-order campaign kicking off. I think it's going to be one of the big hits of the autumn. I'm going to put links in the show notes so you can check that out, and to Susie's deep dive about TikTok, which I mean, she is just smashing it. Absolutely amazing. Smashing it.
Brilliant stuff, Susie. And I've got to say, okay, every single person in the world is going to open that book and go straight to the index. You know what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say it, but you know what they're going to look for. But anyway, moving straight on. What a great idea for a book. Absolutely brilliant. Hope it flies off the shelf for you, Susie. It's brilliant news.
It is fantastic news. And now, just as a little amuse-bouche at the end of the show, Julian Barr, friend of the podcast, Julian Barr is fantastic author. He's my short stories editor. He's terrific. Cheeky lad. He went to GTP, whatever it's called, the chatbot thing, and he said to it, "I'm planning to write a novel. Should I write a 50,000 word outline?" Do you want to know what it said? Right.
Go on.
It said, "There's no definitive answer to this question, as different writers have different approaches to planning and outlining their novels. Some writers prefer to have a detailed outline to guide their writing process, while others prefer to work with a more flexible plan or no plan at all. That being said, a 50,000 word outline is quite extensive and may be overkill for some writers. We're getting a bollocking from a chatbot, right? It could be useful if you have a complex plot or a lot of characters and you need to keep track of all the details. However, it could also be overwhelming and inhibit your creativity if you feel tied to the outline, are unable to make changes or deviate from it. Ultimately, the most important thing is to find a planning process that works for you and helps you write your best work. Some writers find it helpful to create a rough outline to give them a general direction and framework for their story, while others prefer to jump right in and let the story unfold as they write. Experiment with different approaches and see what works best for you." So that was the first one.
That's fascinating.
Then Julian asked the chatbot to write the response in the voice of Ben Aronovich. And here's what it came up here. It says, "Sure, here's a rewrite of my previous response in the voice of Ben Aronovich. Well, mate, the answer to that question is a bit complicated, innit? Every writer has their own way of approaching the planning process. Some prefer to have a detailed outline to keep them on track, while others like to fly by the seat of their pants. Now, a 50,000 word outline is quite a hefty thing, and it could be useful if you've got a lot of characters and plot points to keep track of, but it could also be a bit restrictive if you're not able to change things up as you go along. What I reckon is that you need to find what works for you, mate. Some writers like to have a rough outline to give them a basic framework to build on, while others prefer to dive right in and let the story develop as they go along. The most important thing is that you find a process that lets you tell the story you want to tell in the way you want to tell it." Well, that's far too polite, isn't it? I mean, what would you prefer, that or the bollocking episode?
Okay, yeah. So Julian, you've got to redo that, and you've got to say an angry Ben Aronovich. I think that that would be interesting. Isn't that brilliant, though? I think it's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, the question is that I mean, it's spot on in some ways. It's like, I mean, it's summarizing what Ben told us, but just in a far, far more pleasant way and gentle way. Yeah. Sometimes you do need a good whip up the
but not as memorable. Not as memorable.
No, AI can never capture the magic of Ben
Aronovich,
an author absolutely gobsmacked by two writers trying to finish a novel in a year. Brilliant stuff. Excellent. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us this week, and we really look forward to giving you all more of the good stuff next week as well. We've got an amazing guest coming on. So, folks, thank you so much for being with us this week. And if you would like to join the 200 Word Challenge, develop the habit of a lifetime of writing, pop along to 200wordchallenge.com. Try our free 7-day challenge. Can you write for 7 days in a row and bank 200 words minimum each day? To do that, just pop along to the website and register. And Mark, if people would like to find us on socials,
we are on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram is @bestsellerxp. Drop us a line there. If you want to drop us a line directly on email, go to bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. If you've enjoyed the episode, whatever podcatcher you're listening on, give us a rating, a review even, and just subscribe. All of that stuff makes us more visible, helps us to get more amazing guests on the show, and help make you a better writer. So it's kind of, it's helping your career, essentially. So yeah,
absolutely.
Go for it.
Yeah, do it. And if you'd like to get a weekly update of who we've got on the show and everything we've learned and everything you can learn from them, just pop along to the website, click on the newsletter tab and sign up to our weekly newsletter. So, Mr. Stay, have a great week. Can't wait to chat with you more next week. Have a brilliant writing week, everyone. And just a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.
Bye.